Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, USA Today's NFL Wire site that covers, of course, your Arizona Cardinals for episode 723. It is our Week 13, Cardinals versus Buccaneers, preview picks and predictions with Seth Cox, my co-host from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site. Seth, we are recording a day earlier, and there's a lot up in the air about Baker Mayfield, who suffered a left shoulder sprain against the Buccaneers. But it's funny, isn't it, the fact that even with this uncertainty about Baker Mayfield, they even have odds up and still favor the Bucs by 3 points.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you look at, Jess, where you just go, nobody believes in the Cardinals, and that's a fair thing, right? And it's one of those where even with uncertainty, I mean, the line did move, to be fair. I was telling you before we got on the air, I pre-wrote my Monday morning Cardinals underdogs article. And that was clearly right after the loss to the Jags. And then I think Sunday Night Football had just kicked off. And so the line was sitting at 6.5, Cardinals plus 6.5. So, a touchdown underdog. The Bucs get absolutely blown out. And Baker goes down with an apparent AC joint injury to his non-throwing arm. And the line's not off. Isn't that odd? Like you said, like it's just odd that it's even still on because nobody believes in the Cardinals.
I know that almost always, if there is an uncertainty about, they will just take them off the board. That's but they're like, and instead of 6-point favorite, they're 3-point favorites. They're still playing the Cardinals. So Teddy Bridgewater against Jacoby Brissett, that's still worth a standard 3 points for the home team. That's crazy. But we look at the 2025 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they're injury riddled. But they are still atop the NFC South at 6-5. They're half a game again above the 6-6 Carolina Panthers. And honestly, that depending on how the Panthers do the rest of the season, the Cardinals win in week 2 might actually look like not a terrible win by the end of the year. But they're 6-5. They score a ton of points except against the Rams. They've had 2 bad offensive games, and that was against the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football, and against when they lost 24-9, and then obviously this past Sunday night when they were blown out 34-7 by the Rams. In fairness, the Rams look like arguably the best team in the NFL right now. Matthew Stafford on an incredible. Do you remember before the season we were talking like, well, is Matthew Stafford even going to play? He's thrown 30 touchdown passes to 2 interceptions. He's thrown 25 straight touchdown passes without interception. He's playing better. Like my son was telling me, is like the joke is that they cloned him. They cloned him, and so we're getting like a robot Stafford this year. But besides that, the Bucs have lost 3 straight games, and they don't want to drop to 6-6. They need to stay need to stay atop the NFC South in what is a very tight NFC South right now.
Yeah, and the NFC South is just a wasteland, and that's there is such thing as luck or unfortunate luck for the Arizona Cardinals that they are just, they're in the NFC West, which I'm not going to say that the eventual Super Bowl champs are coming out of the NFC West, but there are legitimately 3 contenders for top team in the NFC this year. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's unfortunate, and that's part of the problem. And so part of the problem, and this is a conversation for the offseason more than this, but part of the problem is that the Cardinals play in the best division in the NFL, and they're always going into a gunfight with, like an orange. Like they're not even like they don't even have a knife, right? Like they're at a deficit to all the other teams in the NFC West, whether it's ownership, coaching, player development, player relations, like things like that. And then you have the NFC South, and you're like, man, if the Cardinals were in the NFC South, they're 2-0 right now. They have a legitimate shot to go 3-1. I mean, that right there is, another, obviously that you'd have to remove a team, but like they could be the Carolina Panthers, right?
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. Looking at the Buccaneers, they are banged up for sure. They don't have Mike Evans; he's on injured reserve. They don't have Kalijah Cansey; he's on injured reserve. And so one of their most important offensive weapons is, and he would have been a matchup nightmare for the Cardinals. But it's interesting to look at what this team does offensively, as they are an above average offense in points. Believe it or not, they're below average in yards. They just outperform. And maybe that's basically over the last 3 weeks, but they are kind of a below average team statistically with an above average record right now. But
Yeah.
the thing that they have with Baker Mayfield is that they have a guy who is absolutely clutch when they need it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If Teddy goes this week, you like the chances slightly better for the Arizona Cardinals. You mentioned it. The last 5 games, they're 1-4, and you look at their losses, and they're all to good teams. We can unequivocally say that the Arizona Cardinals are not a good team. So, but that doesn't matter. I mean, you look at what they did to the New Orleans Saints in their 1 win. They beat the Saints 23-3. Just the Bucs in that game had 212 yards of offense total, 212 yards. But what they do abundantly well is they force turnovers. They have forced 16 turnovers this season. That's 7th in the NFL. They don't turn the ball over. I know Baker kind of had people thought of him as kind of a wild card and got reckless almost, right? But he's not. He's taking care of the ball this year. He's only thrown 5 interceptions, has the same interception percentage as Jacoby Brissett right now. So he takes care of the football. And then the biggest issue that they've had recently is that they don't have their lead running back in Bucky Irving. And that was kind of the concern coming out with Bucky Irving. Now he is practicing this week. And if there was ever a week to come back, will it be against the Arizona Cardinals run defense, right? Because it's terrible. We just got word literally as we're doing the show that Walter Nolan is out this week.
Bilal Nichols and all his goodness is going to play.
Yeah, right.
Can't you wait?
So that's just it, right? This is a team that when the season started, we never would have thought of this, Jess. But now this is a team that the teams that are struggling look at, and they this is a chance to get healthy and get right. And so you look at you look at it this week, that's something that you could see happening. And they've really leaned on their rush attack their last 3 games. I mean, against New England, even without Bucky Irving, against New England, they put up 113 yards rushing. They lost that game 28-23 against Buffalo. They put up 202 yards rushing. They lost 44-32. And then obviously the Sunday night game, that was just a disaster of a game, but they still had 123 yards rushing. They were blown out 34-7, but I think it was 31-0, 31-7 at halftime. So it was one of those things where, the Bucs didn't score in the second half, and the Rams didn't really care in the second half, and so that made it really difficult from that perspective. But I mean, this is just a game with Bridgewater that you're probably going to see a team that's going to lean on their rushing attack, that's going to lean on their defense, even though it hasn't been good in terms of stopping the opposition. They're 25th in points against this year. They're 21st in yards allowed. Like, they're not a statistically good defense. And they haven't really in the last several weeks, played well defensively, but they're opportunistic, right, Jess? And that's the thing that you look at. I mean, you go back to that Buffalo game, they forced 2 Josh Allen turnovers, and then the James Cook fumble. It's going to be interesting to see what they can do, because again, they haven't beat a good team since they beat San Francisco. And by the way, that was Mac Jones, San Francisco, and we can say a lot of things because the Cardinals lost to Mac Jones, so there's not a whole lot we can talk about. But that was Mac Jones, San Francisco. That was key Mac Jones game where he threw for 350 yards and 2 interceptions. And so you look at it, and this is a team that without Baker is a much more palatable opponent, but this might be the ugliest game of the year we see.
That's going to be bad. Let's talk about the matchups coming up next on the Rest of Your podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's come back, talk about the matches, the keys, the matchups that we want to see in this game. That's coming up next on Rest of Red. We're back on the Rest of Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web, talking Cardinals-Buccaneers, the matchups, the keys to this game, and what we know. We don't know yet if Marvin Harrison will be back. We haven't. There's been no injury reports out. Because of Thanksgiving week, we are recording before any of that happens. So we're recording about a day ahead of where we normally do. So there's a lot we do not know. We do not know the extent of the injury situation for the Cardinals. We do not know if Marvin Harrison will be back this week. We do know Walter Nolan is out. We don't know if Amari DeMercado is going to be back. If Rabbit's going to be back. But we know about the Cardinals is that they've done a terrible job at stopping the run in recent weeks. And since Kyler was out, okay, so in Jacoby Brissett starts, they've allowed over 120 yards in 4 of 6 games, and 94 to the Packers and 95 to the 49ers. And you look at those games, they did a terrible job against Josh Jacobs, and they did a terrible job against Christian McCaffrey. How many touchdowns I know McCaffrey scored 3 touchdowns against them. And then if you look at the Packers, Josh Jacobs, he scored twice. And so in the 2 games they didn't give up over 120 yards, the running backs that they faced scored 5 times. So I think you're going to look at, and we're going to have to look at that matchup again as we go through the growing pains of as Cody Simon in the game instead of Mac Wilson. They are not, well, it's not like Mac Wilson was doing great anyway. If we look at that, the run game, they've got to be able to slow the run game. Travis Etienne was effective. He had 116 total yards against the Cardinals. They keep giving up gobs and gobs of yards. Against Seattle, I think there are 3 running backs combined for like 150 yards. Christian McCaffrey had 121 combined yards. They need to slow, and you'd say load the box, but then you've got the passing attack with the Emeka Egbuka, and it's going to be interesting to see, can they do that? Can they slow the Bucs run game? And if Bucky Irving comes back, and here's the thing, even if it's Rachaad White, Rachaad White offers that two-way threat that Travis Etienne and that Christian McCaffrey offer. And so he's going to be able to hurt them in other ways as well.
Yeah, and White, for ASU fans, know that he is that multi-dimensional back that you mentioned. He offers effectiveness both running the ball and then obviously receiving the ball out of the backfield. You mentioned without Bucky Irving, he's kind of been the lead back, although they do love Sean Tucker, and Sean Tucker is a blur. I mean, that guy is one of the fastest men in football. But you look at what, if we take last week out of it, I know that's kind of useless sometimes, but like if we take last week out of it, where just things were bad for Tampa Bay all around. You had Buffalo game where Rashad had 12 touches for 62 yards. You had the New England game, and by the way, New England's defense is far, far superior to the Cardinals defense, where he had 15 touches for 54 yards. You have the New Orleans game, which I'd prefer not to say that the Cardinals are on par with the Saints defense, but I'm at kind of a loss right now, so I don't know. Where he had 15 touches for 61 yards. I mean, this is a guy that gives you, 5 yards a touch. But then you go to Tucker, who's kind of been more of the big play guy. And his last 4 games, again, against the Saints, 12 for 42, but then against New England, 10 for 51. Against Buffalo, he just balled out. 21 touches for 140 yards, came back down to earth. But again, last week, really tough to gauge anything off of. We know for a fact that the Cardinals defense is not as good as the Rams defense. Like, there's just not a sense in this world that they're equal. So, 13 touches for 46 yards is not ideal, but I mean, you look at that New England and that Buffalo game, and I do think it'd be fair to say that the Cardinals defense is on par with the Bills defense, right? Like, they're a little bit better in yardage and points against, but not great. I will say their pass defense is stupendous, but their rush defense is awful, like legitimately awful. And again,
these recent weeks, especially.
Yeah, and again, they allowed 202 rushing yards with a healthy Baker in that game. And I think that's where my concern stems from, is that, we mentioned it. I mean, you went through the numbers, Jess. It's not pretty. And when the Cardinals are going to be stacked against this Bucs team, and they're being expected to slow down the running game, the last 4 weeks are very disconcerting. And I look at that Seattle game more than anything. And that's what concerns me with Teddy Bridgewater. If Teddy Bridgewater is the starter for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I have very little doubt that we will see a 300-plus yard game from scrimmage from the Bucs, and 150-plus might be running the ball, especially if Bucky's back, because they're not afraid. They may not go heavy with Bucky in his first game back, but they're not afraid to get him going again, and then lean on Rashad, who's shown that he can have that impact, and then like I said, Sean Tucker. I mean, if that guy gets going, he is a problem, and so that's the first thing. They've gotten a lot out of rookie Emeka Egbuka this year. He's slowed down quite a bit in the sense of since Mike Evans went out. They've been without Chris Godwin most of the year. But again, you go back and you look, and Emeka has 3 games over 100 yards. Last 2 games have been a little different, but that New England game, he did put up 6 for 115, and I think that was that the game Mike got hurt, or did he get hurt before that? I can't remember off the top of my head. He was out that game. So that was his best game, post Mike Evans, and that's where you look at this. I mean, Sterling Shepard's kind of just a guy anymore. Tez Johnson has had some big moments for their pass game, but he hasn't exactly lit it up.
Yeah.
So it's really just Emeka Egbuka and then Cade Otton, their tight end. He kind of reminds me of oh gosh, now I forgot the guy's name, but he's not this massive receiving threat that's going to make plays all over the field. But he's a guy that kind of gets those catches. Heath Miller, sorry, I couldn't remember the Steelers tight end name. And Heath Miller, where he's just going to catch the ball, move the chains, do a good job. Not prime Heath Miller, kind of end of his career Heath Miller. And you look at those games, and that's kind of what he's been doing. That's what I'm looking at in this week, because you just see an offense in the Bucs that should, on paper, be something that the Cardinals can control and that the Cardinals are able to keep pace with. However, what we've seen this year is that that's just not the case. And that's, obviously where the concern starts to come in, even if it is Teddy Bridgewater, because, we knew a couple weeks ago, right? We knew that you had to slow down Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle, and those guys are running free in the first quarter of the game.
So the 2 guys that scored all touchdowns.
Yeah, we knew that you had to stop Jackson Smith and Jigba, and
they didn't.
Yeah, I think he had 80 something yards in the first quarter.
They couldn't. You had to stop Travis Etienne.
Yeah, they couldn't.
They didn't.
I know, 60 yards on the opening drive, just holy buckets, guys, what is happening here? And so you can go, oh, well, it's just Emeka Egbuka, right? It shouldn't be an issue. Like you said, load up the box, put your bet. Well, who's your best corner? I mean, it is Garrett Williams, and he had a decent game, but he got beat for a touchdown. And we haven't seen a case where they asked Garrett to travel either, right? So that would be something that he's not done much of. And so those are all legitimate concerns, even if it is Teddy Bridgewater playing. The interesting thing though, Jess, is their passing game hasn't been very productive since that win over Seattle. 250 or 248 yards against the 49ers in their win, 258 yards against the Patriots in that loss, and then 210 yards in that loss to the Detroit Lions. But just they're 124, 165, and then 70 in their games against the Saints, the Bills, and then again the Rams. And again, that Rams game I'm kind of throwing out the door, but we still can acknowledge it. That's bad. I mean, there's really no other way to put it, right?
It is, but the Cardinals also have not shown a penchant to be able to slow the passing game. They don't have much of a pass rush, and at that, while Josh Sweat is right there on the cusp of double-digit sacks, he's got 9 on the season. Tampa's got one great tackle in Tristan Wirfs. and Luke Gadecki, who has been serviceable. But the Cardinals they don't offer anything in terms of pass rush outside of Josh Sweat.
No, they really don't.
And with no Walter Nolan, you're not getting much juice from the interior either, because even Calais Campbell, who's been their best, like he's doing it in flashes only now. It's not the dominance that he had the first couple 3 games because he was playing on fresh legs.
Right. And you mentioned Gadecki. He's playing, like you said, decent enough. He's filling in for I think the guy that they expected to start this year. I can't remember who it is. And then, you look at it, they've had kind of a rotation. Graham Barton's been okay as a rookie or second year guy, I believe. At center, but they've had kind of a rotation at those guards. They haven't been real healthy there. And so they've had some different guys. I think Luke Haggard has been playing more. If I remember right, I'll have to go back and look who played in that game against the Rams here. But let's see here. So yeah, Haggard played. Oh no, he only played a little bit. It was Dan Feeney and Michael Jordan were their guards mostly. And so, you look at it, they've rotated in those guards because they haven't been great, out there. But again, I mean, it's not like the Jaguars have, the Broncos offensive line. They're decent at running the football, but like they haven't been great in any stretch. Those are genuinely the concerns, right? Like this is just a team that you look at and they're just not a very good defense right now, and their offense does a lot of things when it doesn't matter, right?
And then we look at on the other side, the Bucs are not an elite pass rushing team, but they're right in the middle of the pack in terms of sacks with 27. Diaby has got 5 on the year. Anthony Nelson, so they have 8 sacks from their guys on the edge.
Are we expecting Vita Vea just to destroy this team this week?
Yes, especially if Will Hernandez is out and we're back to Isaiah Adams for an entire game. It'll be interesting to say the least, especially because the numbers are bad. Like Jacoby Brissett against everyone except the 49ers is just getting hit and sacked. And we look at why didn't happen against the 49ers? Well, the 49ers pass rush is garbage.
Yeah,
they're garbage right now. But so they get production kind of across the board. Diaby leads the way with 5 sacks, but they also, they've got some playmaking guys. Tyke Smith has broken up 12 passes. Jamel Dean in the defensive backfield has got 3 picks and 6 pass breakups, but they're a playmaking defense, and we know all about Todd Bowles and the type of defense that he runs. Bunch of familiar faces. You've got Larry Foote is the defensive run game coordinator, Mike Caldwell inside linebackers, and you've got Levante David. You got Levante David still playing at a high level, and it's just interesting to see. Can Jacoby? Is he going to challenge Jamel Dean? Is Dean going to one, is Marv going to play? And how much will Dean look for Marv, cover Mike Wilson? And what will ultimately be Wilson's production if Heebs moves back over to the Z instead of playing the X like he's been doing in Marv's place?
Yeah, and you look at it and Dean, that is the one thing. Dean is questionable this week. He hasn't practiced yet. He's dealing with a hip issue. If he can't go, that's a boost for the Cardinals and especially Michael Wilson. We'll see about Marv being back. But you mentioned it, man. They like Jamel Dean, Zion McCollum, Jacob Parrish, like their corners are good. And then Antoine Winfield's an all-pro level player. Then Tyke Smith is having an all-pro level year, especially in coverage. So it's just a dynamic group. And then they get a lot from a number of their veterans. You mentioned Levante David, who's been there what seems like forever at this point, right? They have a guy, and yes, this is his name, Servosier Dennis,
something like that.
Yeah.
I want to throw something out there. Like Tyke Smith and the numbers he's having in pass coverage. He has 12 pass breakups this season. In context, do you know how many pass breakups the Buda Baker has in the last 3 seasons combined?
Probably less than 12. Yeah.
To them.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just the thing, right? Like, guys, there are different types of playmakers, in the secondary and things of that nature. Yeah, man, this is a defense that can make plays, and against offenses, they can take advantage of things. And like I said, they cause turnovers. There's just no getting around that. And so they're going to create problems and issues for the Cardinals. The question becomes, what can the Cardinals do to combat that consistently? When you look at matchups, the offensive line is always going to be first for the Cardinals because they've just given up so many pressures lately. And again, we go back to that singular game for against the Niners, but the reality was they just, they got lucky there, right? And so this is a game that you look at, and it is going to really just come down to how often the Cardinals are able to consistently move the ball and stay out of negative plays. I mean, we talked about it quite a bit the other day. Their game against Jacksonville, where they went 3 or 4 series in a row where they had negative yardage in every series, like that's against a Jacksonville defense that's very similar to the Bucs defense. And so are you going to be able to improve against a defense that you kind of just went against this week? And really stop the pass rush of the Bucs and how exotic and how much Todd Bowles blitzes. I mean, Todd Bowles is one of the smartest and most creative blitz designers in the NFL. And I was talking with somebody on X the other night, and they said, I just can't believe how many free runners are at the quarterback consistently. And I'm like,
oh my gosh, that's going to be bad this weekend, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm like, well, you understand that that's not coaching unless they're being told explicitly you're not allowed to change the protection or the play. Now, if that's happening, and we've talked about this since Kyler was starting, then that's an issue. But if it's protections, then that means Jacoby's missing setting the protections correctly, or that means that the line's missing protection calls consistently. So there's got to be a responsible party. I'm not trying to point fingers, but there has to be a responsible party. So until that gets identified, it's not going to get better, right?
Right. Or like, is it the inability to change things? Is it Jacoby missing? It's like, right. It's something's effed up, and it doesn't look like it's going to change. Interesting thing, and I've got this audio probably somewhere. This was years ago when Todd Bowles was defensive coordinator, and we got him talking about the reasons why he blitzes, and it was the most intelligent response to the idea of blitzing, because he talked about blitzing. Well, obviously, you blitz, you actually got to get to the quarterback. There's dozens of reasons why you blitz. Sometimes you blitz so that you take, like, for example, you blitz so that the running back has to stay in for protection. So you're taking one guy out of the route tree. You run blitz certain things. He listed 3 or 4 different reasons why you blitz or how you blitz, and that'll be interesting to see how that plays out this weekend. Let's move on to the predictions part. Coming up next on the Rest of Your Podcast, special Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's move on and talk about what do we predict for this game? What are our picks? And I mean, we won't be able to do much for props, but can't do much about that. That's coming up next on Rest of Your Red. We're back on the Rest of Your Podcast, special Cardinals Talk on the Web for the picks and predictions parts of the show, where we also talk a little bit of props. However, there aren't really any to talk about. Are we at the point where we just pick the other team to win because until, like, there's nothing that we can say that's like, I don't believe the Cardinals will win until I actually see them win, especially like the Jaguars game. That was like, they should have won that game. They should have won that game. You have your +4 in turnovers, and they still managed to fritter that away between coaching decisions and performance. And so there's no way that I'm going to pick the Cardinals to beat the NFC South leader on the road, even without potentially Baker Mayfield. So I cannot, in my even the optimistic self that I can be, glass half full kind of guy, like, I just don't see it happening. I think this is going to be a somewhat, I don't even know, like, is it going to be low scoring ugly, or is it going to be just plain ugly? But I definitely will not pick the Cardinals to win this game.
Well, yeah, you can't. I mean, that's just the reality of it at this point. You can't. I mean, I was the one that tried, right, to be really positive and be like, hey, like, give them a shot one more week, and this is the reality of it. And you and I were talking about this a little bit before. I see people, and I don't know if it's just they don't care. They really think this. Like, I don't know what the answer is, Jess. But I see people like, lost a close game to the Jags. And I'm like, you set a historical negative precedent in that loss to the Jags. Like, you didn't lose to the Jags 27-24. You lost in a historically bad way. Something that hasn't been done in a quarter century, Jess. Like, how are you okay with that? And that's what gets me, is that I'm literally like seeing people on my site on X be like, hey, well, you just run it back with Jacoby next year. I'm like, hold on. All that was talked about was that you wanted to upgrade, that things needed to get better, that the quarterback play, that the team, yada yada, needed to get better. And the consensus now is like, well, if you run it back with Jacoby's won 2 starts in his last 9. Like, 11. He's 2-9 in his last 11 starts in 2 different NFL franchises. People are excited, weirdly, about all these fantasy numbers that are getting put up. But the reality is that these numbers don't affect the game positively. Like they're not winning. And not just that, their numbers are some of the most inefficient numbers in the NFL. They're running more plays than most teams. They're running more plays than their opponents by a staggering amount the last several weeks. A staggering amount. And they're scoring 20 points a game. 20, I think 22. That's really inefficient offense. Like that's terrible. And people are like, well, yeah, but you're averaging 21.4 a game as opposed to, or 22.4 a game as opposed to 19.4 with Kyler. And I'm like, and you're running an average of 15 more plays a game. So you're actually scoring less because you're scoring less efficiently. You're scoring less per times you have the ball. Like when people get indignant about efficiency numbers or EPA or ANYA, like, and they're like, oh, those things don't matter. No, they matter. And that's why typically when you see like the top teams in EPA or DVOA or ANYA, like when you see those teams at the top, they're the teams competing for the playoffs, and the ones at the bottom are the bad ones. The Cardinals are near the bottom with Jacoby. And it's not because he's not putting up yardage. It's because he's putting up meaningless yardage in blowouts, or in a game like against the Jags, he's putting up all of these numbers, and the Cardinals are running, I think it was, what did we say, 20 more plays, 15 more plays than the Jaguars ran?
You said, yeah.
And
they had a ton more plays than they did.
And they scored 17 offensive points, Jess. Like it was 15 more plays. 15 more plays. Their scoring percentage is down because that takes into account amount of plays. Just this team was 20, we'll say 26, because I can't remember if it's 26 or 28. This team was 26 in passing attempts in week 5. In week 10, so 4 games and the bye week later, they are first in passing attempts in the NFL. That's staggeringly bad. Like that's a way to not be a good NFL team, is to have Jacoby Brissett attempting more passes than anybody else in the NFL. That's actually a way to lose consistently. And now we're seeing that.
Yeah. What do you think do you have a score prediction?
It's so hard. Yet? So I'm reading through everything. So Bowles just came out and said less than an hour ago. So we're recording at 11:35 Arizona time on Wednesday. And so he came out less than an hour ago and said Teddy Bridgewater will get most of the starter reps this week, but Baker Mayfield remains in play to start against the Cardinals, depending on how he's feeling by the end of the week. So they're going the Jonathan Gannon route, right? Like we'll see who the starter is this week.
It sounds like they're planning on Teddy, and that Baker could, like, they don't bank on Baker, but it could happen.
Right, exactly. And so you look at it with Teddy, this is a game, that's what I said, this could be ugly, like 21-17 Bucs win. So the Cardinals are right there to cover, but don't. Like that's the type of game I can see this being. With Baker, it would be, I would have it closer to like 31 to 21 type game. So those are that's where I would be for both of those.
If it's Teddy, let me give me 24-20 Bucs if Baker plays 27-20. Because I think the Cardinals will do the same, offensively, no matter who it is.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not going to change anything. Although you hit it. Like it's crazy to think like the Cardinals' run defense was actually very good, right? But when when Kyler was starting, and all of a sudden their run defense is terrible. So it's just interesting. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens. And, the one prop that I'm going to go with every week, and it's not even available. Jess and I looked on both, but it's not even available. And I think you would kind of agree with me, is that if you can get Jacoby, whatever his passing yards is, you take the over, right? Like take the over and then take him over 300 again. It's been a lock. The other one that I would look at would be field goals made, but there's nothing on that yet either. So it's tough this early in the week, but it's even tougher when you literally have no idea who's starting for either team, right?
Right, and maybe what I will do later in the week, perhaps maybe I'll get on Saturday and talk some props as things become a little more. I do have a show lined up with Andrew Harbaugh later in the week on Friday with talking Bucs. He's the manager over there at Bucs Wire, and maybe with that I can as well get back on and record a show talking props later in the week. If you guys want to listen to the content, give you something to do over the weekend this is a football weekend for sure. But that'll wrap up this edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Like I said, I will be back with Andrew Harbaugh later in the week, and Seth and I will be back next week to talk about the results of this game. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening as always. We'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Red!